Welcome back to week 9, everyone. We are so excited to be back. We've been gone for a minute. We've just been really busy, so it's good to be back.
Starting to move, so we'll see.
Cheers.
Flavor of the day.
Afterburner orange. Okay. So for those of you following along in the book.
Before we start, actually, I kind of have something that's been popping through my head that I kind of want to share. Sure. Something that kind of came onto my heart while I was prepping for this session, and that I was thinking about from the week before and so on, but I essentially want to start, and this has necessarily nothing to do with this week, but I want to give a sort of personal challenge and explanation to people, to all the men who may be coming and watching this, that I want you to really focus on developing your love, and doing so every day, understanding your purpose is to, and your representation on earth is tantamount to God's representation on earth. And everything you do matters, because every interaction you have, every time you show love to someone, that's an interaction, that's a chance that that person may finally begin to understand God's love. So the way you treat your children, the way you treat your wife, your friends, your family, all of those interactions, you never know in that one experience you had, that one time you spoke to somebody, might be the thing that actually finally brings them to understand God's love better. And so I just want to challenge you to think about that throughout your everyday. And I want you to realize that nothing you do is insignificant. Everything you do matters. And if you're looking for that defining moment in your life, which I think that's why I'm specifically sort of speaking to the men right now. I don't know, it's easier for me to do that from my perspective, but if you're looking for that defining moment, that thing that you finally feel like you are the hero of your own story, I want you to realize it's every single day. It's every single interaction. Every chance you have to show love to somebody, to choose that person, makes a difference. And is that sort of representation, it's that, I'm always talking about microcosm, macrocosm, right? But it's that micro representation of God's love. And we're imperfect, but God's perfect love is so much better. And if we can show just a fraction, then you're changing the world. And you never know when it's going to be. And so I just kind of wanted to share that before we get into it. It has nothing to do necessarily with this week, except for, hey, we're doing a love dare, right? But just sort of a thought I had, and we can go from there. So with that, week 9, day 57. And again, sorry we're a couple weeks late, but
That's all right.
Yeah, we traveling and things like that, couldn't really record. So anyway, day 57, love is others centered, and it gives us Philippians 2:3. But go ahead, and then I'm going to ask you later to probably prep 2:3 through 4, if you don't mind.
Yeah. But it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves." I really liked this one. I underlined the humility and better part. I feel like, what I was experiencing yesterday, this very much speaks to that. And, I obviously still have some work to do in terms of humility and ego and spirit of offense and those kinds of things. Basically, just something happened where I felt like I deserved something, which we've talked about. You know, we never actually deserve anything. And I was seeking to be validated in that. You know, I really wanted to reach out to someone who understood the situation and seek their validation, but I knew in my heart that that was not the right thing to do. So, you know, I didn't, but when I read this verse, kind of recapping this morning for prep for this, it was kind of perfect for what we had talked about yesterday and what I was working through.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us are can always be more humble, right? I think ego and pride are some of the most powerful sort of emotions that the resistance can use. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, I know that that's my number one weakness. I know that's, you know, the thing that that gets me really bad and that I'm constantly working on. And, you know, there's so many things where, like, it's a good thing to be confident, right? It's a bad thing to let that become ego. And that line is so thin, and it's so easy to step over it and slide into it.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it until you think back on, oh man, that interaction or what I just did, even if nobody else thinks of it as ego or nobody else thought it was, you know, pride related or something like that. You know, I mean, just this last week I explained, like, there was a period of time where interacting with certain people, because of the topics that we were talking about or whatever, I wasn't focused outside, right? I wasn't focused elsewhere. And, you know, my ego and my pride that I developed from, you know, past things or whatever, got in the way of me being, you know, the Christ-focused man I want to be.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wasn't, and nobody, I don't think anybody, if you would watched any of those interactions or you're part of any of those conversations, would have thought that anything was wrong with them.
Yeah.
Right? But
it wasn't who you are trying to be and who you are.
Well, yeah, it's just one of those things that, you know, the focus is in the wrong place, right? And it becomes much more, it's just naturally sort of self-centered, you know, for whatever reason. And you lose, and my focus is now, you know, easily swayed from focusing on others and helping others to grow and be better and, you know, have better lives or whatever. And it just becomes sort of a conversation that just feels nice or whatever, if that makes sense. And is good to sort of, it's like, oh man, that's really nice to be able to have that conversation with somebody finally, but it goes nowhere. It means nothing, right, in the end. And you feel, and like, I almost feel kind of dirty afterwards because of it, right? Even though completely benign conversation, you know, just about like, hey, these are things we've done in our lives or whatever, and some of our experiences, and being able to share that with somebody is great, but it's also focused in the wrong directions, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of all I had for, you know, day 57 outside of the dare, which this dare is always hilarious because Ray literally told me don't. But
Yeah.
because it's just kind of how I refocus anyway when I'm thinking about us and our love. And so you're like, no, you do this enough. Please don't do it this week.
The dare is to buy something for your spouse that says, I was thinking of you. And Lars does this all the time, so he was not allowed. I did have a couple more things from today, though. And because we really didn't talk anything about what the book actually says, which is more about, you know, how the world encourages us to find happiness through validating our feelings and, you know, our appearances, our accomplishments, and use those things to bring us joy. But all of those things are selfish-centered. And, you know, if something is ever coming from a selfish place. It can never be coming from love at the same time. And the whole point of this is to learn how to live our lives with every aspect coming from love. So, let's see. Oh, one question that I wrote down is, do you ever find yourself justifying your selfishness for yourself? You know, do you try and validate what you did or what you said, or, you know, kind of explain or beat around the bush to try and make it seem like it wasn't that, but really that's what it was? Mm-hmm. Oh, I just thought.
Do you mind scooting up just a little? I'm sorry, it's just my crane. No, like this.
I can't turn.
Oh, you can't at all? Oh.
I can lean forward
Sorry.
more.
No, it's just I don't know, the way my chair is set up. Sorry, guys.
Well, you don't have to look at me. It's all right.
Oh, but I don't know. I want to.
Just
You're
look
beautiful.
over
I want to
here.
see you.
And then how often do you point out others being selfish but ignore yourself being selfish?
Yeah.
And I think I don't necessarily point out other people being selfish, but I find myself thinking about other people's flaws. And, you know, I do think I try to find my own flaws, but I don't really see the point in pondering or spending time thinking about the plank in someone else's eye when I've still got the plank in mine.
No,
So.
the sliver in someone else's eye when you've got a plank in your own.
Oh. Right. Anywho.
Others better than ourselves. That's the whole fitting thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so anyway, going with that, day 58 then sort of leads us to love is the standard. And it gives us Psalm 119, 36. And actually, this is where I was hoping, after you read the Psalm, if you don't mind looking up Philippians 2, 3 through 4, so we can read that. I know we just read 2, 3, but I want to add 2, 3 through 4. But anyway.
So the psalm for today is turn my heart toward your statutes and not toward selfish gain. And then you want me to look up what?
Philippians 2, 3 through 4.
So this is, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others.
And so that's where, you know, this sort of ties into what I was saying about the conversations last week, right? It becomes, when I start to focus on those things, when I start to have conversations about those things or whatever, it becomes a conversation about ourselves and not about, you know, the other person, right? Not about love, not about something, and it becomes selfish naturally just because you're it's easy to talk about the things that you did, right? Or that you knew, right? And the conversations the times I don't feel bad about having conversations like that are when I'm actually talking about other people and helping them to, and then, you know, in order for others to understand something or feel something, right? Like, had an interaction last week that I think it was okay to talk about that subject, right? Where I used to work or whatever, because I think it made a difference and my focus was actually on the person I was speaking to, right? To help that person understand how, you know, great they are and how great they can continue to be, right? And so, and if you're watching and you know what I'm talking about, then cool, thanks for coming. But, you know, it was great meeting you and things like that. But anyway, from there, I just sort of have, I kind of feel like this brought up a conundrum that I have, which is that I have really high standards for myself, but I also my ego can take control maybe because of those same standards, right? Because I have an expectation. I don't really, oh man. I don't have like a booger in my nose that's just chilling on
No,
camera. Is it?
I don't see
That
it.
was weird. Felt like my nose like closed off. Anyway, so
You almost made me choke on my drink.
but the I never expect people to live up to the same standards that I hold myself to. But in some ways, because of that, sometimes I have an ego about things, right? Because I know that I'm like, well, I can do these X, Y, and Z or whatever. I mean, let's be real. Even things that we talk about like paralysis and the stuff that I've been through or whatever, like there's a little bit of ego in there. Like, why can't this person do this when I do that or whatever, right? And that's one of those things where like we constantly have to catch ourselves and reflect, and we'll literally talk about it as we're saying it. Be driving somewhere or something, and somebody decides that they want to park in a handicap spot or something, and we're like, really, like you can walk in, and I'm willing to, or whatever, and we're like, ego, like got to step back, correct ourselves, and it's almost like a running joke now. Because we know that that's something that we regularly have to catch ourselves on.
Yeah.
And that we're growing through. It's like, that is certainly the thing I think we struggle with the most. Is we're not like crazy and, or whatever, but it's these little things that can become bad if we let them. Right?
Yeah.
So with that, do you mind... did you already read Philippians 2:3-4?
Yes, I did.
Oh man. I guess just long story short, this day talks about standards and living up and making love the standard. And so...
Well, the very next verse is, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus.
And so if you're making that the focus all the time, you're making love, choosing other people the focus all the time, you're flexing that muscle, and eventually it'll get easier. It's become easier for us over just doing this, challenge, I think.
Yeah.
At least
To at least
for
catch
me.
ourselves and recognize when we are having a problem and
having the humility to, like I said, after the other night, I literally sat down and I was like, man, I feel bad that I let things go in the direction they went instead of having a conversation about God, which I should bring up more in that sort of situation or whatever. And I don't know if I'd be there if we weren't doing something like this. So
yeah.
It's cool.
And same for me yesterday.
Yeah.
I would have certainly reached out and complained and sought the validation and whatever. The last thing I have from today is it does talk about how even though an action can be generous and kind, it can still be from a selfish motive. And we've talked about this before. And, sometimes people can't recognize that you may be being a little bit manipulative or it's not genuine, but other people can. And that almost hurts even more when someone's basically pretending to do this really nice thing, but the motivation behind it is selfish and not genuine. But so, it just points it out so that you start to recognize that you might be doing that and can catch yourself and change.
It's sort of, age old, like, if you give me a foot rub, I'll give you a back rub, right? Or whatever. Like, oh, well, it doesn't have the same feeling as like when you're just doing it to be nice.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny how that works, but just the motivation is different. And I think people can sense that too. If you're genuine and somebody misunderstands it, that's probably more them than it is you, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, You ready to move on to day 59? We're blazing. We're going
Yep.
fast this week. We're doing well.
Yeah.
It's probably going to get long though all of a sudden.
Not for me. Mine's all short for the rest, so.
Well, plus I added my little spiel there at the beginning, so maybe we're not going as fast as I think.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So
go
day
ahead.
59 is love sets priorities, and we're looking at Proverbs 21:21, which says, "The one who pursues righteousness and faithful love will find life, righteousness, and honor." I wanted to read a bunch of the questions for today, but the biggest thing that I got from this day was how, even though it feels like you're putting in extra effort to prioritize your spouse or a loved one, it is always so worth it. And it brings you joy, it brings them joy, and it, majority of the time leads to something better. Whatever that is, it leads to something better. And so putting in that extra oomph, even when you're tired or whatever the situation may be, it's always going to be worth it.
Well, and it's like priorities, right? So many people, I mean, myself included, right, will take something and they'll claim that it's a priority, right? Or they'll be like, well, I'm doing this because it does X for my spouse or whatever, right? And man, the question becomes, what are you actually choosing, right? Because that's what you're showing love. And we're going back to the, definition of love, right, or whatever. And more often than not, you're probably choosing the other thing, not your spouse, right? And so the action, even though it may be correct, like your job or whatever, you're like, well, I'm doing really well at my job and I'm going to continue to do really well at my job because that helps my wife and my children have whatever, right? But more than likely, you're actually choosing your job over and over again. More often than not, like we tend to see that, right? Whereas, you're sort of sacrificing your family for that, and you're making an excuse. You're not being humble about what you're doing or really reflecting, and it causes so many problems, right? Because your priorities are not straight, right? And that's what I was thinking of, and thinking of some of the people in our life, and stuff like that. That, man, their priorities are not straight, right? And or the times that our priorities haven't been straight or whatever, and how important it is to know what they are.
Yeah.
And think about, what am I actually choosing here?
Yeah.
When I take this action, am I choosing the right thing? And don't try to justify it. Don't try to do, if you're having to take a couple steps to get where you want to go, then you're probably not doing the right thing. And you'll kind of know. If you have to question it, you probably aren't doing the right thing.
Yeah, if you've got that gut feeling, that's God saying,
Yeah, that's the Holy
think
Spirit.
about this.
Yeah, that's the Holy Spirit setting you up.
Yeah. Am I going to read the questions for
Oh,
that day?
yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry.
So I always love the questions that they pose, or I like coming up with my own questions from the day. But they presented some for this day. It says, do I truly want what's best for my husband or wife? Do I want them to feel loved by me? Do they believe I have their best interests in mind? Do they see me as looking out for myself first or for them first? So, just some good things to genuinely think about and to be honest with yourself about. And for
Get wrecked.
Yeah, I was going to say, for some of us, that's going to mean some harsh truth and some change to come, but it's a good thing.
It can be something as simple as like, whatever your spouse is doing might be irritating you, and you don't know why, or you don't know. You're like, man, why? Like, why are they doing X like this or whatever?
I'm sitting here wondering, like, What have I been doing that's irritating you?
There are times where like something like that happens or whatever, and I might want to say something, but I know that it's not rational. There's something that's kind of getting at me, and I'm trying to, and I have to just go like, that's when I go into prayer mode or whatever, and I start thinking about it and praying about it and sort of correcting myself, because I'm like, no, it's the right thing, or she's doing exactly what she should be doing. Why am I frustrated, or why, and that's my reflection time, right? If there's ever a moment where something like that's happening, I have to ask myself those questions,
Yeah.
whatever. So I don't know, are you good with day 59? Ready to move on to day 60?
Yep.
All right. So love is thoughtful, and it gives us Psalm 139, 17 through 18.
How precious also are your thoughts to me. If I should count them, they would outnumber the sand. So, do you want to go or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Today kind of talks about how basically you have the honeymoon phase of your relationship, and in that phase you're a lot more thoughtful, and it's kind of viewed as like the best phase of your marriage because you're getting closer to one another. Everything is special all the time.
On average.
Yeah,
on average.
on
people
average.
view it as the best time.
Yes, on average.
Modern day world stuff.
Yes. But the conclusion of today is the honeymoon phase can be all the time if you are intentional and try to make it that way. And it just takes a little extra effort to be thoughtful. Mm-hmm. And, there's so many different ways to do special things for your spouse. Every single person's different and has different things that mean a lot to them. And nobody knows them better than your spouse. And so using that gift God gave you of knowing that person so intimately, and if you think about it, the longer you're married, the more you know all these special little things. And so
all the inside jokes you've got.
Yeah, but so the more special your relationship can be, it can be even better after 10, 15, 20, 30 years than it was in the honeymoon phase because you know them so well.
Well, and I could say we've been together, what?
6 years.
Yeah. And as much as I enjoyed the beginning of our relationship, I
like it way more now.
Yeah. No. It's the more we grow and the more we focused on God, the beginning of a relationship,
Yeah.
we talked about it, but we didn't really, it's not a focus, right?
Well, and we read the Bible.
Yeah.
But it was like our own thing. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about it together.
Yeah.
We didn't really make it a thing to help our relationship grow.
Yeah, it was more sort of a metaphysical conversation, philosophical conversation that we would have, less about a, focused lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it makes such a big difference, or something as simple as this challenge, right? Doing the Love Dare 365. Mm-hmm. It's been great to keep us mindful. This last week, we didn't do a whole lot, right? Or at least I don't feel like we did a lot, but as far as, Love Dare wise worship wise, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We were so busy doing a million other things that, and I missed it.
Yeah, me too.
And I feel off. I literally the first couple of days we got back, it was just I'm just trying to get back into the right space. Mm-hmm.
That's why I was so thankful for my day on Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was, I went and hung out with a friend, and her and I just talked about God the whole day and prayed and worshiped, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
I told Lars, I was like, oh, I feel so renewed now, and sorry you didn't get to have that kind of day.
No, it's okay. But it was just, so it's funny how this is more work, right? When we add it to our schedule or whatever, it's more work than we necessarily need to do. But it makes a difference. And I think, it just feels good and helps you stay focused and stay thoughtful.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So,
And it flexes those muscles. You know.
it asks us to read 2 Samuel 9, 1 through 13. You don't want to read all that?
No. I'm sorry. This one, we can summarize the story.
All right, go ahead.
So, why are you going to make me do it when you know it better?
I don't know it better. I don't know.
I just don't know all the names well. They're very difficult for me to pronounce, and I don't want to mess them up. But basically, it's the story of, I'm assuming Samuel is talking to the family, and he's asking if there's anyone left in this family, and the servant says, yes, it's the young boy, and his feet don't work. And he tells them, essentially, you will always have a place at my table. And he gives them back the land, and,
So it's not Samuel, it's, I want to say it's David. Let's just pull it up real quick. Let me make sure that, because it's about David and Saul, right? And the last of Saul's children, I think, unless I'm mixing up the story.
No, that's right.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it is
Technical
David.
difficulties. So basically it's 2 Samuel, 9, 1 through 13 is David asking after what children are left of Saul, who in his family still exists, right?
Yeah.
Because Saul was still the chosen king of Israel, right? He was still the man that God chose to lead Israel. He just went astray, right? And so his children are still deserving, and just because anything their father might have done or whatever doesn't mean that they should be forever, condemned. And so he asks around, and he wants to give the right respect to Saul, to his former king and the man who brought him from being a shepherd, and just this little boy to being the new king of Israel, right? He wanted to give him the proper respect, and thus he found his son. I am so bad with the son's name, so I'm not going to say it, but
it's
Mephibosheth, I think, is the name. But
yep.
his son, and so he takes Meph. I'm gonna shorten it, but and Meph is lame, right? His feet don't work, and so he's not able to get around very normally or whatever. He needs a lot of servants to help him and so on. And so David brings him to his table, which is a really big deal. That's a really, really, when you look at the culture of ancient Israel, right? That's a really big deal to eat at somebody's table. And he says, essentially, you're a member of my family now forevermore. And I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to watch over you. And all the things and we're going to show you the proper respect that you deserve as the son of the former king, right? And how much that changes, you could talk about all the implications. I sit here and think about it from a strategic perspective, right? Other people, there may be dissidents or whatever that would attach themselves to Meph, right? And say, well, he's the son of Saul, right? And so he's the proper heir to the throne or whatever. David's just nobody. And there's always going to be people like that from when I'm thinking about this from a strategic, worldly perspective. And just by showing Meph the proper respect and giving him, bringing him into his family, all of those things go away. All those people who may be upset, all those people who may be, whatever, may try to attach themselves or push Meph to do something wrong. Now, they find somebody who instead is in support, and they see that a righteous king now, sits upon the throne. A king who's going to show respect and love to people, right? And that simple act of love, that choosing of Meph that David took, makes a difference forevermore, right?
Yeah.
So
That's what the whole day is about, is love being thoughtful.
Yeah, so that single thoughtful act, right, to help him and bring him into a place where he can be comfortable instead of, sort of living in the outskirts, makes a difference. So day 61 brings us to love matures, and it gives us Proverbs 19:22.
Which is what a man desires is unfailing love. So for me, day 60 and 61, the conclusion of them both were very similar to me, of like,
Okay. That's funny because
when
it's
you-
different for me.
I mean, it kind of painted the same picture of when you first fall in love, everything's daisies and roses, and then as the relationship continues, it requires you to be more thoughtful and be more intentional for things to still be daisies and roses. And so I literally just wrote same as day 60. So
So the proverb is what really sort of stood out for me here,
yeah,
because when you learn about leadership or, how to motivate men, right? People, probably the number one thing is, the number one motivator is probably honor, right? And that, because you've got fear, reward, and honor. Those are the three main motivators in human beings, right? And you could turn honor into love or whatever. But no matter how you look at the things that motivate, men do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And people do all kinds of crazy stuff. And the reason, they'll be like, oh, I want honor, I want glory, I want whatever, a lot of money or whatever it is, right? And the expectation, the underlying reason why, is always love. They want somebody to choose them unfailingly, right? And it's one of the reasons why, the oldest of the prodigal sons was so blessed and he didn't realize it. Every day, he was chosen and shown that unfailing love from his dad. Whereas the younger son was away and didn't know, didn't feel that same thing because he thought he'd given it up, right? And so from a godly perspective, that really matters because you are always being chosen. You do always have that unfailing love. You don't have to go anywhere else to seek it. One of my favorite quotes from, Miyamoto Musashi, for example, is, you will find nothing outside of yourself that will lead you to your goal. Everything is within. And I think that that's a really sort of, and that's a philosophy that runs through so many different, really good, prominent sort of philosophies around the world, right? Stoicism, Zen, whatever, right? And it always comes back to, everything's within yourself. And that's because God gave us the Holy Spirit, right? And God wrote the law upon our hearts. God shows us that love. All of these things, everything's within you. You don't need to look anywhere else. And if you are looking elsewhere, then you're going to find something that's lacking, always.
yeah.
And so maybe that's kind of what put on my heart, that thing that I started with, right?
Well, that's what it made me think of, was this day.
Oh, that's funny. Because I didn't even realize it when I was writing it, because I thought of that at the end of all of my prep. That just popped into my
Was
head.
that all of this?
And, the thing that it always comes down to is you want that unfailing love. And when you're no longer looking for it, that's one of the greatest blessings of God, right? And when you really start to get into it, once you understand that you have a chance every single day, because every moment, your slate's been cleansed, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So you always have a chance. Every time you're never going to screw up so bad that
It makes me think of that Reckless Love song.
I'm not sure.
Never-ending reckless.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's truly astounding and something that gives you hope beyond anything else. There's no you always have the opportunity to redeem yourself. And boom, that just makes me think of what we're supposed to learn from this, right? And what we're trying to grow in, which is, if my love is meant to be a representation of God's love, or, you know, a fraction of it on earth, then how dare I give up on somebody, right, who might be, or judge someone who might be struggling, right? And sometimes that's really hard, because you do have to kind of know when to cut people off so that you aren't enabling them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, so that's where prayer comes in, and just really trying to let God sort of speak to you through it all, because it's not easy. You know, I mean, I just think about so many different things. You know, you hear about guys who come back from war or whatever, and they don't know how to bring themselves back in. And we've had conversations about how, like, there have been studies on why PTSD is such a problem back home, you know, or whatever, but not so much in theater or whatever. And it always comes back to, you know, there's a running theory that it's actually because people feel like somebody is with them, because you have to in order to survive, right? And that's natural human community, like psychological understanding of things, is we need community. And our society doesn't do very good with, you know, has really sort of stepped away from community. It's all about, it's a little too individualistic, right? Individualism is really important. Being independent is important so that you can help your community. But you can't lose your community and expect to be completely healthy, right? And I think we see that all over. I think that's what we see all over the world, you know, especially here in the United States or whatever, is a lack of community. The places where community is the least supportive, or the communities are the least, like, you know, together, are the ones where the most problems occur, right? And so, I don't know, I just think the reason why those things happen is because people are choosing one another. They're loving one another, right? And then if you're not choosing other people, if no one else is choosing you, I'm sorry if you can smell that, then you're not going to feel right. You know, you're going to be looking for something else. And that's where God comes in and really sort of gives you a lot of that, no matter where you are in the world. You can be completely alone, and you're not completely alone.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to say is, I really liked in here on this day, they gave a specific line that said, I thought it was an interesting quote. I don't even know what it means or exactly what it comes around to, but, you know, it basically says, get to the point where you can tell your spouse, my love was thinking of you. And I don't know why I like that so much, but he was like, you know, I think it's the, like, personification of love that sort of changes it. And I thought that was just an interesting thing to think about, and something that I'll think about as we go forward.
It's almost like your love, it's its own thing within you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to prompt it, or,
Right.
you know, it's literally just this separate entity.
Yeah, so now you've developed that muscle enough that your muscle memory automatically just puts you there, right? So that's why I liked it, I suppose. Day 62, love is understanding, and it gives us Proverbs 2:11. Actually, I think we just combine day 62 and day 63, because I think they perfectly match one another, which is love is understanding and love is discerning. Because one is the understanding part helps us to, like, love helps us understand one another, and then gives us the discernment to make the right decisions. So I think we can probably combine the two, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
So we get Proverbs 2:11, and then
Discretion will watch over you, and understanding will guard you. Do you want me to read the other verse?
Yeah, and so then the other verse was Philippians 2:4.
Everyone should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others.
So 62 just talks about how men and women are different. And in our relationships, we have to understand that and understand. And even if we're not talking about, even if you don't believe that men and women are different concept, which I don't know how you understand, I'll admit I don't think I've ever seen. Yeah. But even if you get rid of that, two people are different.
Yeah.
And anytime two people are together, so this could even be, we like to take this outside of just your marriage relationship and look at this, further. But if two people are different, and you have to understand the way that other person interacts as well, the way that other person looks at things. And I think it was funny because they hit the nail on the head with this one, which is, for me anyway, in our relationship, which is, I'm dumb and I say exactly what I mean, and there's no hidden meaning behind stuff, or I just literally say something and you'll literally be like, that was so mean, or you think that I'm being so mean, and I'm like, what do you mean? No, I just said this, and you go, well, that means this, and this, and I'm like, no, I literally just said exactly what I meant here.
Yeah.
And it's something that so I thought it was funny that it talks about that, right?
Yeah.
That you read between the lines, and there's
yeah.
nothing between the lines for me. It's just flat.
Yeah, I overanalyze so bad. I'm like, okay, but you said this, but does that mean you also meant this, this, and this?
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I literally just meant this.
It made me think of the Jordan Peterson, how he described, to make sure that you're understanding someone, you repeat back to them what you think they said, so
and
that
is
you
something
can
that
truly.
I so need to get better at. I'm terrible at it, but anyway.
But what a great, because that's the whole problem, is that I'm not understanding what you really mean, so I have to say, wait, so are you saying blah, blah, blah? And then you clarify it and say either no or kind of, or yes, that's what I mean. And once you have an understanding, then you can have a conversation. But if you aren't sure that you have an understanding, then what we've done millions of times is have a conversation and we're actually both either saying the same thing but not understanding it, or we're talking about two different things. And
well, I think that's so prevalent in all conversations these days, right?
Yeah.
Everybody just talks around things. They're using the same word but have different definitions for said word. And you can't, and it literally just becomes, or people refuse to define something. They're like, you know what I mean. And you're like, okay, well, here's what I mean when I say it. The way you're explaining it is not the same thing. So I don't understand how, I don't know where we're going.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. If you're going, in order to show love, you have to try to understand, right? And you have to make that choice to understand that person and where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And so, there are even times where, I have to, you'll be, cryptic, and you're like, I'm not mad, I swear. And then...
That's because I'm just trying to process my emotions. I'm like, ooh, that got me and I don't know why. And I don't even know how I feel about it, so I need a minute.
And I'm like, no, we're going to talk about this. And, we talk about it. Because it can be, it can be something as small or whatever as I was lifting weights one day and, the way I said something to her really upset her. And I was just like, no, I swear it wasn't you at all. It's literally just, I had heavy weight in my hand and I wasn't breathing right. And so it came out weird, but I swear but our feelings were so hurt because it was gruff.
Part of that is from past things though. There's things that have made me have physical responses to how things are said just because of circumstances. And so
I want to clarify,
hopefully-
not from me, right?
No,
Okay.
no. You know, but
Yeah.
they don't know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, unfortunately, he can say something in the wrong tone, and I get all worked up and, you know, really uncomfortable, even though he can tell me over and over that you didn't mean it that way, and I wholeheartedly believe you. Like, I can't stop what already, you know.
Well, and there are times that I have to watch myself pretty carefully too sometimes, because there's also a mode of speaking that I'm used to, you know, that I spent most of my life doing. And, you know, and now, and sometimes, and that mode of speaking isn't normal for most people. And so I may say things because it's just, you know, I'm curt and quick and, you know, just trying to get whatever it is across and, you know, really quickly. And you often, like almost every time I do that, you're like, whoa, like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, sorry, I was just saying what I was saying. Like,
Yeah.
there was no tone, you know, it's not an attitude, I'm sorry. Like, I was just, whatever the subject was or whatever, like that just popped into my head, and I was in that mode of thinking or that whatever. And so that's why it came out that way. I apologize, you know, and that's something that we are like constantly working on, making sure we understand. But I think the thing that's great is we've also learned to talk about it
Yeah.
and not let those things fester, because we could, right? I mean, we could just let things go, and who knows what that would mean for
Yeah, if we don't talk about it.
the hurts, you know, that may fester.
Yeah, then
Right.
down the road I could say, oh, you're always being so blah, 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 you know?
And so I think, you know, that's the whole understanding part. And then going into the discernment, which is day 63's whole thing.
You underlined a lot.
Yeah, because I really liked it. I liked, if you want to read it, great.
So, should I just read that whole paragraph?
Sure.
It says, a woman deeply longs for her husband to be thoughtful. It is a key to helping her feel loved. Few things validate her worth like knowing her thoughts are given merit. When she speaks, a wise man will listen like a detective to discover the unspoken needs and desires her words imply. In like manner, a considerate wife will learn to communicate truthfully and not say one thing while meaning another.
I think that's sort of that was a really good sort of just, hey, this is how you do it, right? This is the proper answer. And so that's why I underlined it. It was just like, hey, this is...
It takes effort and change from both sides to make sure the communication is clear and understood.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm dumb, and like there are times that if you don't say exactly what you mean...
I never feel like I'm cryptic, but I don't know.
Last night, I was like, hey, when you get home, are you going to eat? You know, and you're like, yeah, of course. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, great. And then you get home and you do a million other things before you eat, and I was like, wait, I thought you were going to... Oh, okay.
In my brain, I thought it was just a general question of if I'm gonna eat. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm gonna eat. That didn't mean to me, are you going to eat right away when you get home? You know me. Remember the chair moving thing in the car? I am so literal. So unless you know.
So literal.
Isn't that?
Yeah, but we're literally talking about how sometimes you say things that are cryptic or whatever, and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't think that was cryptic. I think that was you putting your own thoughts into what I said.
No, so the chair thing, I was like, just scoot it forward. And she's like, oh, is forward this way or this way? And I'm like, no, scoot forward. And I don't know how else I could have said it, but...
There was so much more to that than what you just said.
Was there really?
Yes, we were in the car and it had to do something with the airflow, and I don't know, you were telling me to move my chair forward and I was doing it, but you meant something else. I don't know.
This is a long time ago.
It was
this was like
first
6 years
started
ago.
dating,
Yeah, like.
But it was a
whatever
hilarious thing, and neither of us apparently can remember the whole story. So, anyways.
Doesn't, but yeah, like I guess from what I remember, so I was like, but So it's just funny, like the whole.
That was so bad. That was just such a bad storytelling.
This is us, guys. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, like the whole point is love will give you the right, will point you in the right direction, right? Understand, I mean, how much better do you feel when I'm actually, I notice, like when I go, no, like, what do you think you need to do? When there are house projects, for example, and I just give you free reign and I'm like, all right, what do you want to do? And you're like, this is what I want to do. And I'm like, okay, that always works out so much better, when I give you that, like, respect, right? That works out a million times better than anything else, right? And letting you know that, like, no, it is my duty to make sure that your voice has merit, right? And you have agency, right?
Let's keep this in mind when we work on the fence next week. Because I am going to need your help verbally, and
I'm not looking forward to this because I just want to say, go get it. That's our running rule in the house. Is we learned this very early in our relationship when we started living together, which was, anyway. Okay, if there's a project, I just need to go away and let Ray handle it. Like if Ray's working on a project, I let Ray work on said project. And I don't try to give input. I don't try to do anything, because if I'm sitting there watching or I'm trying to give input or something like that, like all it does is frustrate you.
yeah.
And you feel like I'm frustrated or what, and all these little things, and it just becomes not like a positive thing. It doesn't really end in like an argument, but it's just it never feels good.
It's not enjoyable for either one of us.
Yeah.
So
So I just go, all right, Ray's in project mode, and I just let you do your thing.
But I'm going to need help. The fence is beyond me. I need additional input. So
We'll see.
communication.
But no, I mean, we'll figure it out, I'm sure. But with that, there are some questions that I figured we could leave with everybody with. Maybe we can answer too. I think we're kind of already running close to time.
Yeah. Would your spouse say that you are a thoughtful person? Do you take time to think through upcoming special events, birthdays, or anniversaries when you could wow your spouse with your calculated kindness? I mean, you definitely do that. I'm not so good at that, I don't think.
I don't know. I still think one of the greatest presents I've ever gotten was a Bible from you. It's pretty legit.
Yeah.
So
You're hard to buy for, though, because you are so particular about what you like, and you already get the things that you really desire anyways, so I'm left. Basically, my only options are to make him some food that he has not tried, or,
you could like knit me a scarf or something sometime. I don't know. No, I don't know. For me, like, presents have never been the best presents to me are the ones that, aren't necessarily some sort of material object or whatever, but have a reason or a story or something like that. And I think that's why, like, the Bible's so cool to me is, what the Bible is focused around, the extra things that are in there or whatever and stuff like that really fit me and are nice, and that I'm interested in. And so it's that's a great present for me. And I think that's why, like, that's also kind of how I get presents or whatever, most of the time anyway, when it's an actual thing that I'm trying to get somebody a present for and not just something random, is I try to give something to somebody that means something, or, that I think could be used down the line or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but, so with that, you want to lead everybody out with the prayer, and then we'll give you our usual end with getting wrecked.
Sure. Oh, I thought you meant come up with one.
Oh, I mean, if you want, you can do that too.
I was like,
I'm
oh,
fine.
all right. So the prayer for this week is, Heavenly Father, give me discernment and understanding in how my spouse uniquely thinks and speaks. Give us a breakthrough in our communication that results in us better honoring one another and you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And you can pray that for your spouse, your friends, your family, all of that. And you probably should. You know, I
Yes.
probably should.
Yes.
So,
All
with
right.
that, thanks for joining us. Probably won't have one next week. Sorry, we've got another really, really busy week where we won't have any daytime at all. So,
No, next week we're here still. It's the following week we're gone.
oh, is it? Oh, cool. So next week.
So
just
we'll
kidding.
see you next week.
Yep, we'll see you next week, and then we'll go from there. Anyway,
Thanks for joining.
thanks. Get wrecked.